Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, retail tech investor, and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you the insights from some of retail's leaders and legends, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. January Digital is a marketing leadership company solving business challenges through consulting, media excellence, and actionable analytics for some of the most innovative, growth-oriented brands in the country, including Carhartt, Kendra Scott, Strivectin, and Steve Madden. Made up of January Consulting and January Digital, they offer strategic leadership services and full funnel media planning, execution, and optimization, leveraging data to provide insights, yielding client success. This week's KPOV is about wholesale, a channel that's been shunned by many rapidly growing D2C brands, as well as later stage brands. Wholesale is making a comeback. I believe it's a critical part of omnichannel, ensuring that physical product, gets closer to the customer. Obvious advantages include greater brand exposure and profitability that can rival the brand's profits online. Brands can enter relationships with a wholesale partner. Think big doors from Macy's to Neiman's through dropship, a combination of in-store and dropship presentation, or most beneficial, a shop-in-shop relationship. Most important advice to brands, choose your wholesale partner wisely and quality of partner over quantity of them. On this flight of the Retail Pilot, we have retail legend Tommy Hilfiger. Tommy is the principal designer of Tommy Hilfiger Global, uplifting and inspiring consumers since 1985. He has pioneered one of the world's most recognized premium lifestyle brands, celebrating the essence of classic American style with a modern twist. Tommy's career in fashion began when he was in high school in 1969, opening his first store, People's Place, in his hometown of Elmira, New York. A decade later, he moved to Manhattan to pursue a career in fashion design, before launching his namesake brand with a single menswear collection. Since then, global retail sales of Tommy Hilfiger products have grown to reach approximately $9.1 billion as of 2022, powered by more than 16,000 associates worldwide, present in 100 countries, and more than 2,000 retail stores, including its largest global flagship store at Tommy.com. Through the Global Tommy Cares organization, the brand supports various international initiatives, and Tommy currently sits on the board of Next for Autism. Hilfiger has earned numerous distinguished awards over the years, including the CFDA's prestigious Geoffrey Bean Lifetime Achievement Award, British GQ's Design Legend of the Year, BFC's Outstanding Achievement Award, and Women's Wear Daily John B. Fairchild Honor for Lifetime. I am honored to have Tommy Hilfiger with me today on the Retail Pilot. Tommy, welcome to the flight.
Thank you, Ken. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you as well. And congratulations on your most recent runway show back in New York City. Super exciting to have you back on the runway.
Thank you.
Tommy, what led you to retail and design?
I started my own business when I was 18 years old. I opened a retail business selling jeans, basically, 1969, the summer of Woodstock. At that time, the look was very hippie-like. I opened in my hometown of Elmira, New York. My store called People's Place was very successful. So I opened a number of stores on college campuses in upstate New York. And it led me into designing and creating product for my stores. And as a result of the success of the products, I decided to build my own brand.
You launched in 1969, the same year Don Fisher launched The Gap and Ralph Lauren launched Polo. That year you opened People's Place. Tell us about the store, the product, the vibe, and customer experience.
First of all, we opened 5 stores, and then we had summer stores. We had stores in Lake George. We would do pop-ups. We would do pop-ups at different concerts. We would do something on Cape Cod. So anyway, we had a lot going on, but mainly the stores were hangouts where people would come and buy their concert tickets. They would pick out their wardrobe for whatever concerts were playing that weekend. They were lined up at the door the day we would receive deliveries, and we would sell out of literally everything that would hit the selling floor. And those days are far and few between now, but we were the only game in town in some of these smaller towns. And there were a lot of young, cool people who wanted to look like rock stars and wanted to sort of be in the fashion game. So my partner and I used to drive to New York City, which was about 5 hours away. We used to buy jeans off the streets in the Village. And we used to go to really cool stores in Manhattan and buy a lot of their excess merchandise. We really had a lot going on. Then we opened record stores. We had one store that had hair cutting. It had shoes and accessories, women's clothes, men's clothes, jean department, customizing department where we used to embroider and sew patches on jeans. Would print T-shirts, rock and roll T-shirts. We promoted concerts, burned a lot of incense, sold a lot of bongs and a lot of papers, and the music was blasting. We had band practice in the basement every night for different bands. And then we also opened a punk rock store called The Underground in the 70s.
Your stores were nothing short of a social happening, a place to be seen, to be a part of a community and hang out. I think you were a huge music aficionado and still are today. Your brother is. Were you constantly playing tunes in the store? Was this people came there for an experience? It was more than just the clothing. It was like, as you said, it was a hangout. It was a cultural happening.
It really was. We didn't have social media, but we had social media. But it was face to face where people would come to people's place to find out what was going on and find out about all the new fashions, all the new albums, what bands were touring in upstate New York. So it was a great experience. I used that as my springboard.
After spending a few years as a curator and store operator at People's Place, you decided to make the move to designing your own product. Is that correct?
That is correct. I hired local seamstresses to make jeans for me. And as I continued to buy from vendors, I would always look at what they were showing me, thinking if I added a pocket here or if I customized it this way or that way, I think I could build a better product. So then I started freelancing for some of the vendors I was buying from, giving them ideas and sort of collaborating with them. Then at one point I said, oh, I really have to start my own.
In 1980, the official Preppy Handbook was released. I don't know if you read that or if that was meant anything to you back then, but I looked to see who the iconic brands were in 1980. And it was interesting. They called out Brooks Brothers, Ralph Lauren, LL Bean, J. Crew, and Lacoste. But that precedes the launch of Tommy Hilfiger, which I think 1985?
Yes, 1985. I started designing the collection in 84, but I released it in 85. So next year it'll be my 40th year. The alternative to Preppy as we knew it. So I made everything oversized. I added all this detail. I started dressing musicians. Then I started adding a lot of color like red, white, and blue. Then the hip hop crowd embraced the brand. So
I would have to say that the brand, at least in my lifetime in retail, and I'm catching up to you in age, so we're contemporaries for sure. I think it is the most culturally inclusive brand of my lifetime. It's amazing how you've taken different people, music, art, fashion, culture, and bring it all together. And I think most importantly, make it accessible, which to me really helps differentiate Tommy Hilfiger from a Ralph Lauren. Ralph has a brand, but there's a lack of accessibility to it. And I think Tommy Hilfiger created a brand that was far more inclusive.
Thank you for recognizing that. That was my intent. I really wanted to create affordable, wearable fashion that was accessible to everyone. And I think that some people now are sort of catching on to the idea that it's cool to be inclusive, but we have been inclusive for, I guess, even before Tommy Hilfiger, the brand was launched, even when we had People's Place, or we just wanted to bring people together who like fashion and music. And in terms of the way the culture rolls with us, I believe in themes, fashion, art, music, entertainment, and sports, because I think that's pop culture. And I think pop culture really moves the needle in society.
I remember when you launched the brand because I was a buyer at Macy's. I worked right next to Jane Greenberg, if you remember her, because she was
Yes.
buying Tommy Hilfiger. I worked with a friend, Mike Tucci. Now, we were all very competitive. The department store buyers were all competitive. Now, Jane had the hot brand. I had, I think, Girbeau, and I had Guess, and Tucci had Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein. So we were all trying to figure out where Jane was going on her Friday field trips, which stores. We'd have to get her admin to know where she was going because we wanted to follow her because we knew that she was getting all this space for Tommy and taking it away from Guess and Calvin Klein. We'd follow Jane until she caught on, and then that ended, and you took over a lot of the space at Macy's while you were growing the brand. I remember very distinctly your Hangman ad, which I just thought was brilliant. Just for context for our listeners, the Hangman ad refers to the Hangman game we played as kids, where you would see initials and have to complete the words. And the initials for this Tommy ad were those of Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, Perry Ellis, and Tommy Hilfiger. Share with us a little bit around what it was and the creation of it. It was a pretty ballsy ad when it came out. I think it caught people by surprise.
Yeah, I think it was disruptive, as you could say. I was backed by a company called Mirjani International. They owned Gloria Vanderbilt jeans, and Mohan Mirjani introduced me to George Lois, an advertising exec. George, what are you thinking about for advertising? And I said, at this time, we were just in menswear. Some really cool looking guy hanging out in the Hamptons with shirt untucked, hair blowing in the wind, wearing the oversized preppy gear. And we could put the ad in GQ and here and there. He said, you're crazy. Don't do that. I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, I'll show you what you should do. So a couple days later, he came into my office and he had these big boards. He basically flipped them around, showed me the work he had done. And when I read what he had created, I thought, okay, there's no way I could do this. How could I compare myself to Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, Perry Ellis? I mean, those three, in those days, the greats. And I'm brand new. How could I do that? And he said, do you want to spend millions of dollars, which I know you don't have, and wait 10 to 15 years for anybody really to know your name? And I said, no, I would like, obviously, to be a known name, really build the brand. And he said, well, you've got to do something disruptive. And I said, well, you can't do that. I mean, that's crazy. He said, yes, you can. Not against the law. Stir up a lot of talk. And so Joel Horowitz, my partner and CEO at the time, said, let's do it. Mohan Mirjani said, let's do it. So we did it. And the day we launched it with a Times Square billboard, in those days we had desk phones. Phones were ringing off the hook. People were saying, who the hell does he think he is? These guys, Calvin, Ralph, and Perry, have been working years on building their brands. And this newcomer comes in and tries to compare himself to the greats. Are you kidding? And New York Magazine, New York Times, New York Post, all of the publications were hammering me. And I thought, okay, well, I better run and hide, really work hard to try to make a great product, because I knew a great product would win if I put my nose to the grindstone, so to speak. So I punched hard and I worked on the fit, on the fabric, on the detail, making product that I thought my customer would embrace. And fortunately, that happened.
And it was the Hangman ad. So it was a total happening at the time. I mean, we were like going wild when we saw it. So I can only imagine how you felt putting it out there, because it was quite irreverent and disruptive. And I think it really did what it was intended to do, which is move you forward, which clearly you filled into that. In 1992, you took Tommy Hilfiger public.
That's right. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to meet a couple of new partners along the way, because Mirjani at the time, well, he took the license for Coca-Cola clothes and he asked me to design it. So I sort of reluctantly did. I wanted to focus on my own brand, but he was supporting me. So I couldn't say no. So I designed Coca-Cola clothes, and Coca-Cola clothes became explosive. It was on fire. And it was the time when Benetton was on every street corner. The Gap sold jeans, basically, jeans and T-shirts. And Coca-Cola clothes became sort of this fun, colorful brand. And I remember the first year we did $250 million, and everybody was like, whoa, this is crazy. Blew everybody away. But the Gloria Vanderbilt business was starting to level off. He was running out of money. Then the Coca-Cola business was one of those explosions overnight. And then, okay, everybody had a Coca-Cola rugby or T-shirt. And he didn't have the money to really support my brand. So I was fortunate enough to meet Silas Chow and Lawrence Stroll. They owned at the time the Ralph Lauren license for Europe. Silas had factories. Lawrence was running the Ralph business in Europe, but they decided to become my partners and leave Ralph. Immediately, we re-strategized the business and decided to go after putting shops in every better department store and also open more of our own stores and then branch into Europe. So we had an aggressive plan, and it actually worked.
And that took you to an IPO.
Yes.
What was it like ringing the bell on the floor of the stock exchange?
It was an exciting day. It was exciting knowing we were a public company and we would have enough money for even future growth. Then we did a license with Estee Lauder. We were the first brand ever to do a license with the Lauder company. And we did the Tommy and Tommy Girl fragrances that were award-winning major hits. And at the same time, we were dressing everybody from Britney Spears to David Bowie to sponsoring Rolling Stones tours to dressing like hip hop, rock, all these cool people, surfers, skaters, preppies. And the brand just took on a life of its own. But I had a great design team around me, and we were always trying to come up with product that would be familiar but fresh and new with a twist. And I think that the product helped drive the business.
Who influenced you? Is there a designer or designers that were really important to you as you were growing up that you looked to or motivated you or inspired you to do what you did and do?
Well, I always looked at what everyone else was doing. I wanted to be informed as to what they were doing because I wanted to do what they weren't doing, or I wanted to do something that was my own, but I was learning from them. And I would say I always looked at what Ralph was doing. I always looked at what Calvin was doing. I looked at what Perry Ellis was doing, but then I looked at what people in Europe were doing and people in Soho were doing. I'm looking at everything and like a student of retail. So I spent hours shopping stores and understanding the traffic flow, the layouts, what was hot, what was not. And I always wanted to know what was selling and what was being marked down. Coming from a retail background, I had that in my blood.
Let's take a quick break with a word from our sponsors. Predict Spring is a global point-of-sale platform live in 22 countries. The platform includes mobile POS, endless aisle, fulfillment, inventory management, and clienteling, creating a true omni experience for customers and associates. Predict Spring powers Suit Supply, Converse, Lovesac, Decium, Janie and Jack, and Bouclair.
So that was sort of a great education for me.
You were quite friendly with Karl Lagerfeld.
Yeah.
And you asked him, how does he manage to keep product fresh, exciting? And he said, quote, I go back to the archives and make the product relevant for today.
I spent time in Europe with Karl because we bought his Karl Lagerfeld brand and we spent hours together. I said, Karl, how does it happen? He said, he started out the response by saying it was very easy. He said, I went back to Coco Chanel's archive. I took everything that I liked and I made it relevant for today. So when I came back to New York, I went to my design team and I said, look, I just spent time with Karl Lagerfeld and he told me how he did it. So we started raiding our archive, which is full of goodies, and we reestablished a lot of the items that were designed in the early days. I would say redesigned them or we tweaked them for today to make them relevant for the next generation, say.
As the business grew, there was a lot of attention around Tommy. It certainly was one of the leading brands in the States. In 2006, Apex stepped in, paid $1.6 billion for Tommy Hilfiger, taking you private. And then I guess almost a little less than 4 years later, PVH comes along and pays $3 billion for the Tommy Hilfiger brand. Question is, what did Apex provide? And then what did PVH provide for you, for the brand, for the growth?
Apex helped us take the company private because it was public. There was a slowdown in the US business and the stock was not in great shape. So it was a perfect time to buy it back. So we bought it back from the public. And then we went to work on repositioning it to follow what we were doing so successfully in Europe. And what we did in Europe was to improve the quality. Prices were a little bit higher, but refined the product, I guess you could say. And we got out of a lot of the discounters and we re-strategized. So Apex was very helpful in providing us the money to buy it back from the public. And then 3 years later, that we sold it for $3.2 billion to PVH. At the same time, PVH owned, Van Heusen shirts and things like companies like that. And they were our licensee for dress shirts and for neckwear. So that sort of worked, but they also owned Calvin. And we thought, okay, well, PVH owns Calvin and Tommy, two powerful American brands. The synergies would be great because just from sourcing alone, we would be able to be much stronger as an entity. Fast forward, I don't know how many, how many years later, about almost 10 years later, here we are, still growing. Calvin is in great shape. We've got great leaders within the entire team. We've got growth all over the world. So we're very happy, but it's hard work every day.
You mentioned sourcing. On the other side is the design process. What do you believe to be the unique part of the Tommy Hilfiger design process, your secret sauce?
Well, we started 3D design almost 6 years ago. So the design process became more precise and much faster. So that was a big move on our part. But our design center is in the middle of Europe right now. And we have 250 designers, and they are sitting in Amsterdam, 1 hour from London, 1 hour from Paris, 1 hour and a half from Rome. They're sitting sort of in the epicenter of the world. So we're able to, I would say, understand what is going on in the marketplace from a fashion standpoint earlier. We are very, I would say, technical now in terms of quality, in terms of fit, in terms of delivery, and it's running like a well-oiled machine.
Positioning of the design team really keeps you very close to all the trends that are important for continuing to add newness to your brand.
Yes, but at the same time, we don't necessarily want to be so trendy because we feel that we have a look and a positioning in the premium marketplace that we're very happy with, a very strong core. So we do evolve the product, but we don't want to dramatically change the whole look from season to season because we feel so confident in who we are, what our positioning is. I think it'd be very dangerous to have the pendulum swing back and forth all the time. And, we've made mistakes along the way, and sometimes the mistakes happen as a result of that knee jerk. And we are thankful for where we are today. We want to continue to just fine tune that.
With marketing the brand, which is now taken on so many different definitions, what do you look to, or what do you think is important in marketing today? I mean, from social media to collaborations, connected TV. What are you seeing out there that's effective for Tommy in communicating and amplifying the brand?
Well, influencers are very influential. So we think using the right influencers is really important. But we've had great success with collaborations, from collaborating with Gigi Hadid to Zendaya to Lewis Hamilton. And now we've just signed Sophia Richie, who is maybe our next Gigi. We also launching a campaign starring Kendall Jenner. And we are also co-sponsoring a movie on Formula One starring Brad Pitt and Damson Idris, who is now one of our ambassadors. We sponsor Formula One racing through Mercedes-Benz, and Lewis Hamilton is currently the driver. So we've done a lot with Lewis, with George Russell, the other driver. So we think that our touch points are in the zeitgeist, and we want to keep our awareness up as to who in the zeitgeist will be effective in terms of being a communicator of the brand.
It's funny, your shows have always celebrated. It's been an expression of where the show takes place, whether it's been at the Oyster Bar in Grand Central or on the beach in LA. You create drama and theater with your shows. I guess more so than other shows that I've seen, it's just very connected and very integral to what you show and share. From a marketing perspective, that must be very much a part of the overall communication of the brand.
It is. It's important to show who we are and do it in a unique way. I never want to put on a normal fashion show. We did that 40 years ago, and times have changed. People want entertainment. I think when I include fames into what we do, it is meaningful.
Looking out into the future, Tommy, how does the brand continue to grow? I mean, you have so many different venues or ways to grow the brand, whether it's wholesale or stores, e-commerce, licensing, international. Where do you think the majority of the growth will come from in the future for Tommy Hilfiger?
Well, let's just say Asia is a great growth opportunity for us. We've been cultivating for quite a few years now. Just due to the sheer numbers, the population is so enormous. China in particular is very strong. India, we were the first American designer to enter into India 15 years ago. And the population of India is exceeding that of China. So just do the math. It's pretty amazing. But Europe has been very good to us. It allowed us to position the brand on a higher level, which then resonates worldwide. There is growth in every one of those areas you just mentioned, and including licensing, whether it's eyewear or home or beauty or fragrance. They're important businesses that are part of the mix, but are not businesses that we have expertise in. We just understand what the product should look like and what the marketing should be. But we need, obviously, professionals who are adept in creating products that are part of the lifestyle.
I think it's a key differentiator between you and Ralph. Ralph spent a lot of time buying back the licenses, and you take a look at the home business where it's been challenged there for years versus having experts partner with you to express what they do best in a specific area, which I think ultimately would allow you to grow more quickly and probably produce better product. I'm a fan of licensing being part of the growth story because I've seen both sides of the equation and get both sides of the equation also from a control point of view. Tommy, if you were to go back 50 years, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
At times, I have given advice to people I mentor, younger people, and I tell them to be patient because it'll happen, but I'm a very impatient person. So that's not good advice. I don't regret any of it. I think that there have been mistakes along the way for sure, but the advice someone gave me at one point in time was to never give up. And there have been days I've felt that it just may not work, and I never gave up. So I will continue to use that as one of my slogans, but I'm also a very positive person. So I'm always thinking of what can be done, how we can do things, not how we cannot do things. I try to influence my team into believing that anything is possible. And I really believe that anything is possible.
With far more wins over the course of your career than missteps, there must have been a couple of missteps that you remember that may have been painful. Can you just share any of those missteps with us?
Well, I went bankrupt when I was 23 years old.
Okay, that's a misstep.
Okay, so I never went to college because I started my business while I was in high school. And What it taught me was that I had to learn the business of business. And I knew nothing about the business at that point because I opened my first store when I was 18. By the time I was 23, I'd overexpanded. I learned a tremendous amount from that failure. And I learned as much as I could possibly learn about the business. And I think that has been a big benefit for me because I think a lot of designers don't really care about the business or don't understand the business. They just want to be creative, and that's great. But I think that if you understand the business, your creativity will be much more fruitful.
What would you say, Tommy, are the greatest challenges facing your brand today?
I think the economic headwinds globally are affecting everyone and has to do with what is going on in the world. And we have to continue to move forward and do the best we can, even with obstacles ahead.
Tough environment for sure. Even seeing the luxury space starting to pull back a little bit, which we haven't seen in quite some time. In the true spirit of Tommy Hilfiger and taking a page out of your playbook, and I'll thank Gary Scheinbaum for feeding me this question, who Gary worked for you for 27 years, and I'm sure he knows you as well as anyone.
A superstar.
Super guy. I love him. Gary and I go back a long time, but
I know you do. Yeah, Gary used to talk about you all the time.
as you would ask your team, what's next? Because you always want to know what's next. I would like to ask you what's next and new for fashion.
I think what's next is all relative to who you are as a brand, because what's next to some brands may not relate to what's next for me. What's next for me is focusing on the continuation of elevating the brand, and that's through pure product. But at the same time, looking at what's next through marketing and advertising the brand in a unique way that is connected to the DNA. And I really believe that it is very important to stay connected to the DNA of the brand.
And I would add to that, what's next with technology, because I know that you really are passionate about technology. You've created video games, you leveraged AR mirrors in stores, and you were probably one of the first designers to grab onto see now, buy now on product that was coming down the runway. I believe you created an app so those watching a show or even seeing it streamed could actually buy product coming down the runway. And I know that from your last show, you can buy now the new iconic jacket, the baseball jacket of the season. That's available right now on your website, which I saw, which is great. What are you excited about in technology?
AI. And we're just at the beginning. So AI is going to have a big impact on everyone's business. We don't know exactly how yet, but we know it's going to happen. So I think that we have to keep our eyes and ears open. I really believe that dabbling in digital and technology is going to be somewhat of a risk, but it is also going to show us the way in the future.
I agree. Right now, AI is taking on almost a life of its own. I even hear companies are creating chief AI officer. I mean, they're really getting consumed with it because there's so much happening, and it's hard to really pare down that you need versus what there is that you might not need. But it's amazing with how it's impacting online, the customer journey. There's so much happening, certainly from call centers being replaced by bots. I'm even seeing out there today AI sales associates online that you can speak to and ask them if they have it in a different color and in my size. So you can get the best of the store experience.
It's crazy, but it's real and it's happening.
Yes. Tommy, you ready for rapid fire? This is how we wrap up the show.
Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Favorite place to travel?
Europe.
If you could pick any band to join, which band would it be and what instrument would you play?
The Rolling Stones, and I would play guitar with Keith and Ronnie.
Favorite streamed show?
I really liked Succession. I thought that was really good.
Which designer most influenced your career?
Well, I would say Carl had a lot to do with influencing me, but not any one other than Carl.
When not designing clothing, what is your favorite occupation or hobby?
Being with family. I love boating, yachting. I like traveling with the family. I like the outdoors. I like sports.
Were you rooting for Kansas City, Or were you
Yes,
rooting?
yes.
You are. All right, good. That was a great game. Wow,
It
that
was a
was
great
fun.
game.
Really good. Favorite artist?
Warhol. I met Andy in the 80s, and he definitely influenced me.
The last question I have, most iconic model of our lifetime.
It's hard to say because there are a couple of models who are still models and haven't really gone to the next level yet. But I would say Kate and Naomi are right up there. Can't say just one.
And with that, Tommy, we're going to land this flight of the Retail Pilot. Thank you so much for joining me today. Loved having you. It was such an honor and a thrill.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you again.
You too, Tommy.
Okay, all the best.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.